AI imagery. What is it and how can we use it for ministry? We're talking about that and more today on this bonus episode of Making Sunday Happen. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey friends, welcome to this bonus episode of Making Sunday Happen. I wanted to dip in here and interrupt our regularly scheduled programming to talk about AI imagery, AI technology with some friends of mine. Rob Lauder, Jason Moore, and myself have been playing in AI artwork over the last few months, and I wanted to give a report on our findings, what we've toyed with, and some of the insight into how AI is being implemented for ministry. And we'll have another episode coming up with my friends Alex Lyons and Ryan Frank, where we'll dive in more to Chatgpt, but this episode will focus on AI art and imagery. So this may have started for you a few months back. You might have been seeing some of your friends on Facebook post crazy AI images of themselves. That was and still is a bit of a craze. But one of the apps that is used for that, kind of taking your own pictures and making AI imagery of yourself, is an app called Lensa. But the main program that we're going to talk about using today is called Midjourney. So if you haven't heard of it, I want you to go to midjourney.com, and it can be a little bit technical and a little bit confusing to use this AI technology, but it's a website, and then you also use an app called Discord. So if you're not familiar with either of these applications, I want you to go to the Midjourney site, midjourney.com, M-I-D, Journey, midjourney.com, and click sign in or sign up. And I want you to create an account and then authorize it. It will ask you if you want to authorize that account. Just say yes. And you'll also need the Discord app. So you're going to go to Discord, D-I-S-C-O-R-D, discord.com. And it's there that you'll need to pay for a plan for Midjourney. So you might want to try it for free. There are some limitations on a free version, or you might pay $30 or so for a month. You can discover it and explore around in it, then cancel if you want. So it is a monthly fee. The monthly fee is about $30. You will save annually, and there's some different plans and features on those plans if you want to check that out. But once you're in Discord, you can click on the plus circle and create your own server. So I know that you might go a little step by step and remind me or rewind me in this video to kind of walk this through step by step a little bit. But I wanted to go elementary for you because I wanted to give you a step by step process of how to get there because we're going to jump right in with Rob and Jason. So we're going to go a little bit technical and talk about some of the imagery that we've created, some of the prompts that we use and things like that. But I kind of wanted to get you started first. Okay, so once you're in Discord, you can click on the plus circle and you're going to create your own server. So you can do that. And then within that server, you can create channels for yourself to organize your threads. Okay. Then in one of those threads, so you might put like hashtag Bible characters or hashtag scenes or hashtag, personal fun or something like that. Then in the message prompt in one of those threads, you're going to type /imagine. Okay, so like a backslash, then the word imagine, then click hit the tab button or a space, and then that's where you're going to type in your prompt. Okay, and it's here where you can get really creative. So you can think of any visual that you want to see. Come up with the craziest thing that you can think of. And the Midjourney application within Discord is going to give you a block of 4 images. And then there's going to be a bar where it has U1, U2, U3, U4. and then under that, V1, V2, V3, V4. So it's going to be a grid of 4 images that it creates. And how that works is the box to the top left is number 1, then right beside it is number 2, then to the bottom left is 3, and the bottom right is 4. So on your U buttons and your V buttons, you can hit, like, if you like number 1, you can click U1, and it's going to make an upscale version of that image. Or you can click V1, and it will create variations of that image that it created. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of how it works. You can choose any of those 1, 2, 3, 4, and start playing with upscaling stuff and variations of stuff. Okay, so that's kind of a very quick rundown of just an educational process of how we are getting to where we're getting. Okay, so right here is where we're going to pick up with Rob and Jason. So myself, Rob, and Jason, we've all been in Discord. We've all been in Midjourney. We've all been playing with prompts, different prompts to put in, and how we can use that for ministry. What kind of imagery can we create? What are some of the questions that come up with AI imagery? Is it legal? Is it scouring the internet for other artists' work and putting it together? Meaning, is it stealing from other artists? Or is it truly an original image? We're going to talk about that and more. We're going to talk about tips for how to put in prompts, to how to get to some of the images that you want to see. And what especially Rob has really been playing with how to detail those prompts out so you can really get some creative imagery going. What can we use this imagery for? Can we use it for sermon series? Can we use it for social media? We'll talk about all of that. So that's where we're going to pick up with Rob and Jason when it comes to Midjourney. And my conversation with both of these guys will start right after this. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching and listening to our podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you would, so that you never miss an episode of the show. Just go to youtube.com/1230media, all spelled out, to find and subscribe now. Click the alarm bell to be notified of all future episodes. You can subscribe at youtube.com/1230media. That's all spelled out, youtube.com/1230media. Hey guys, today I welcome 2 great guys in the digital space. Rob Lauder, Creative Arts Director at the Summit Church in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, and Jason Moore, owner at Midnight Oil Productions. Guys, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Indeed, I'm excited for it.
Rob, it's your first time here. Jason's old hat. I need to start putting Jason on the payroll as many times as he's shown up.
Right.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, so the 3 of us have I'm doing this as kind of a bonus episode because all 3 of us have been diving into the world of AI, especially Chatgpt, which is more of a text-based assistant, and then Imagery, playing with different software, playing with prompts, seeing what's working, what's not. And I wanted to kind of have you guys on to just pick your brain on what you're finding, what we're learning, some different things that you've tried, and just kind of share that with ministry leaders. So, Rob, let's kind of start with you. What kind of started you off? Of course, AI tools have been around for years, but the last few months especially, we've really kind of dug deep into what Chatgpt can do, what Midjourney can do, and other tools like that. So kind of tell me your discovery process in AI and the tools and the imagery and all that.
Yeah, so I mean, Google teased Deep Dream 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
When they just first started coming up with neural networks and imagery, and it was really interesting at the time, but didn't really have any practical application for creatives. My background is I'm a photographer, videographer, creative director at Summit, and so I lead a creative team. And I've got a pretty wide background in terms of diversity of what types of creative applications that I do. And so really my attention was piqued when OpenAI came out with DALL-E, one of the first mainstream image generators. And I kind of got in there, played with it a little bit, put in some basic prompts. And I'm like, these look like I made them in Microsoft Paint or something. They weren't very elaborate at the time. But then Midjourney, which is another AI image generator, came out and started to see just the quality and variety of images that could produce, and started getting really intrigued in it. So I signed up for the trial, got in there, and realized just how powerful the tool could be. You can, anything that comes out in your imagination about, you can produce with an AI image generator. And from there, past 6 to 12 months, things have exploded, like you mentioned. So it's been a really wild ride.
So obviously Chatgpt and Midjourney, those are kind of the software that I've been kind of staying in mostly. I've dabbled in some others, but what are some other tools that you're finding, Rob, that are maybe most effective, most helpful, especially for ministry?
Yeah, I mean, the two that you just mentioned are, kind of the most accessible, I think, for people. Midjourney, we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a little bit, is a little bit more complicated to kind of work into the user interface. But they're accessible, they're great, and the reason that they're blowing up is because they are so good. One of the tools that I've been using a lot lately, and I think I turned Jason onto, was installing Stable Diffusion locally. So Stable Diffusion is one of the technologies behind image generation. And what you can do is you can install it locally on your computer, and then you can, one, generate all the images you want, as long as you have a powerful enough rig to do it, without having to pay the fee for something like DALL-E or Midjourney. Though I still keep Midjourney because it is so fantastic. But the benefit of installing Stable Diffusion is that you can use different models. You have extensions and plugins to make it do different things. And it really becomes a powerful and creative tool for folks who are interested in AI image generation. Some of the cutting edge things like video generation are being built in and developed, and new stuff comes out every day.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to try to keep up with the amount of AI tools that are coming out, and what it can do from video editing to chopping up your social media clips to imagery and text based. It's just insane the rapid pace that we're on. Jason, what about you? Kind of walk me through the last few months with you, especially. We've both been playing with tools like this over the last few years, but I agree with you, Rob, that the last couple of months has really been where more of the laymen can use it without even though Midjourney takes, and we'll kind of walk through this, takes getting into Discord and takes some other steps to kind of get into, but still both of these are, especially Chatgpt, is really accessible to the layperson right now. So Jason, kind of walk me through your journey.
Sure. I mean, if you don't count Siri, which, is a form of AI that completes sentences and puts things on my calendar, and I use Grammarly. I started using that a few years back, which, made me sound smarter than I am sometimes. I think for me, it all began back in August of last year. DALL-E 2 came out, and they had this feature called outpainting, which I remember reading something on theverge.com about it, and I took the Mona Lisa and put it into DALL-E. And basically what outpainting does is it imagines all of the things that are outside of the frame. And I was able to create this entire scene that basically looked like, Mona Lisa was in the middle of it. And that completely blew my mind. I thought, how on earth is this possible? And so I started doing lots of kind of experimenting and researching. And I told Rob, I'll say on the call, has been like my Jedi master. I message him quite regularly on Facebook and say, hey, how do you do this? Or what'd you do here? Or, he's really turned me on to some great tools. But one of the things that I really appreciate about the season we're in versus when I first got started in media creation, and y'all, I may be older than y'all, I don't know. But way back in the day when I first started learning Photoshop and all that kind of stuff, you had to buy, tapes, and they were big bucks, and, you'd buy training, and it was expensive and limited. And now you can go to YouTube and learn everything. And so I spent a lot of time, even before I signed up for a Midjourney account, learning how it worked and taking lots of notes. And I have just pages and pages of notes. Anyway, I started getting into ChatGPT, and I love that, it's a brainstorming partner. It's an expert at your side. I like that it can be a foil. You give it take the opposite point of view and force me to explain this in a way that somebody's going to get it. I mean, think about in ministry, if you're trying to give your message or share your message with somebody who's a skeptic. I mean, ChatGPT is also the most devout Christian I know. I mean, it comes back with like some incredible insights and, from the perspective of a person of faith and
which I was worried about at first. When it first started, I started like, I'm going to try to blast this with theology and see how it, and I was surprised with, I mean, there's some few tweaks here and there, but I was surprised with how accurate it was in its scripture and other things.
Yeah. So for me, ChatGPT, Midjourney, and I was really appreciative of Rob for the information on Stable Diffusion locally, which is really, I use Midjourney for some things and Stable Diffusion for others. And one of the things I really like Stable Diffusion for is that if you want to take somebody's image and treat it in a way, it works so much better in Stable Diffusion because you can train a model. And there are a bunch of different ways to do it. There's textual inversion. There's something called LoRa models. There is something called Dream Boost. You can train a model and then, tell it to create a pencil sketch of that person or a painting or make them look like an anime character or whatever. It's sort of like what we all did for a minute where everybody jumped on Lensa. And you spent your $17 on Lensa or whatever, and it generated 100 images. It's basically just Stable Diffusion, that kind of thing. And then Rob turned me on to one of my favorite little resources is a website called Leapix, and you throw your photograph in there, and it'll build a depth map for you, which then allows you to kind of move around in that picture. Of course, DALL-E. I did play around for a minute with Canva's AI generator. It wasn't great. I'm already in the beta for Firefly on Adobe. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like, for me, I've learned After Effects and I'm pretty much I've mastered that program. And I remember, this is a long time ago, but when Apple put out Motion, and trying to go to Motion from After Effects when you can do everything you want to do and all the bits and pieces, and then going to Motion where it's like a lot of it's in the can already and you don't really have that much control. That's kind of how I feel with going to Firefly right now. It's like Firefly doesn't give me I know how to use the other tools, and Firefly is just more of like a beginner's kind of thing. So far I haven't been super impressed with it. Rob, I don't know if you've had different experiences. I'm not saying I won't use it, but
yeah, I kind of had the same first impression when I tried it out. It's a couple of the advantages of Firefly is that one of the big, questions right now in AI images is the source material that's used to train the model.
Right.
And Firefly, because it's by Adobe and Adobe has Adobe stock and they have the rights to use all those images, they've got this huge library of images that they can use to train their models. I think there's a lot of ethics things that Adobe is bringing to the table. But at this point, it's just another version of all the other things that are out there. I think one of the things that Adobe is going to lead in first is monetizing everything, so we have to pay a subscription to use it. But then second, because everybody's paying a subscription to use it, they've got huge resources in development and a wide audience of subscribers who are creatives. And I think there's going to be a lot of really boundary pushing things that you're going to see out of Adobe in the next 6 months. They're working on podcast AI. They're working on images. They're working on, if you go to the Firefly landing page and look at some of the things that are coming up, those are what excite me. Right now, it's just like, it's just another thing.
Yeah.
Jason,
I'm especially, I was just going to say, I'm especially excited about the vector tools that it looks like they're going to eventually come out with, because Vector so far has been really hard to recreate. I did just see that Stable Diffusion has a vector plugin, but last I saw it was only black and white, and the experiments I saw looked like is difficult, maybe not worth it quite yet, but it'll come. It's coming. Sorry, Carl, I cut you off.
No, you didn't. I was going to ask you if you've played around with the 11 Labs, more the clone voicing type stuff. Tell me what you discovered there.
That is probably my favorite. I mean, I'm using all these tools, but my favorite tool of all right now is 11 Labs. I have spent countless dollars over the years, over 25 years of hiring voiceover artists and renting studios and phone patches and all this kind of stuff, ISDN lines and all that kind of stuff to get voiceover artists. And there's still certainly a place for that. I'm certainly not done with that. But the AI sounds so convincing. And you can train it on your own voice. And so for one of the conferences that I'm speaking at, I'm going to show how I created a little podcast where I cloned my voice and was able to use Chatgpt to write a script. And it's so convincing that when I showed my wife the podcast, she's like, "You started a podcast?" And I said, "Yeah, not anything about it that's, what do you think?" And she's like, "Sounds fine to me, but I didn't know you're doing." And then I said, "I didn't speak one word of that." And her mouth dropped open. She's like, "You got to be kidding me." I had a project that I did last week that had a very tight turnaround. I had to write the script in one day. I generated the audio at 2:00 in the morning when I would not have been able to get a voiceover artist. It usually takes 2 or 3 days to go back and forth and do all that kind of stuff. When you need to tweak a little bit, you generate a different version of the voice. And when I turned it over to my client, they were so happy. They said, "We love that voice." And they had, I told them after the fact, but I'm like, "That's AI." It's not actually, it was trained on someone's voice. But yeah, 11 Labs is one of my favorite resources. And Rob and I both have been using it. And I think we both burned through all of our word usage in like the first day.
The amount of money I've spent on random subscriptions in the past 6 months has been insane.
Yeah.
So Jason, if he's on the lawful good side of the spectrum, I'm on the chaotic good side of the spectrum. I've been using 11 Labs for humor content. So the reason I got into 11 Labs in the first place was as an April Fool's gag for our church. Our pastor is J.D. Greer, and he's always using Nick Cage references in his sermons. So I used a combination of Midjourney, some B-roll that I found on the internet and stole from his Right Now Media stuff, and then cloned his voice, cloned Nick Cage's voice, and put together a 60-second movie trailer about his upcoming film that's coming out. And of course, used Chatgpt to write the movie script and the production notes. And come to find out later, he was getting texts from like all over the country, excited for his new upcoming creative endeavor that was premiering on April 1st, which is a Saturday at all of the Summit campuses. So that was entertaining. And have some other entertaining projects that I've worked on there, mostly for my own humor, but then other people seem to enjoy them too.
Nice. Speaking of that, this is probably a good chance to tell people that we are actually not real right now. This entire podcast is, no, I'm just kidding. You never know. All right. So Rob, let's camp out on Midjourney for a little bit. Let's go kind of elementary, or for people who haven't played with it or maybe have attempted to, but like, okay, wait, I have to sign up for Discord. What is Discord? How do I install that? And then setting up my own server in Discord. And it's a tad bit clunky to get to the actual interface with Midjourney. You want to kind of walk through that maybe in a very layman's terms for newbies?
Yeah, so let me preface this with, if you release this podcast, from the time we're recording, anytime in the next 45 minutes, this might change. So keep in mind that things change so quickly in the space right now.
Yeah, that's right.
One of the things that I've caught wind of Midjourney working on is a web interface. So hopefully the whole Discord thing goes away and this point is moot. But if you want to get started right now, in order to use Midjourney, you need to use a chat service called Discord. If you've used Slack, it's really similar. It's just basically, you've got different servers that you can connect to. In those servers, there's different channels. And I remember back in the old IRC days when I was 14 in the internet chat rooms, it's all coming back again. So in order to get started with Midjourney, you go to midjourney.com, you sign up using your Discord account. And the first thing that you're going to find out when you get in there is that it's utter chaos because By default, everybody's generating their images in this series of Discord channels.
I don't know why they do that.
So you're trying to use trying to figure out what to do and what to put in where, and these images are flying around, and I just kind of stared at it for a minute to try to catch up.
Yeah.
But here's the essentials. Number one, I don't think that currently they're offering free trials right now because it got so popular and blew up so quickly. And I think because, when the political winds are shifting, people are using it for all sorts of nefarious purposes as well. So they've kind of closed it off to paid subscribers, I think. But the beginner plan is like $8 a month, and it is more than worth $8 a month just for the sheer entertainment value, if anything. So you create your account, and then you would use / commands, just like you use on Slack, in order to interact with the Midjourney bot, which is the bot that is doing all the secret sauce on the back end. And so you use a command. If you were to Google Midjourney Quick Start Guide, you'll find all of these commands, or countless YouTube tutorials on the subject. But the basics are: you type /imagine and then a prompt, and it will spit out a series of 4 images that you can then select from and either upscale them, or you can do advanced things like remix or create variations of those things. But the basics are: you just type in imagine, and out comes some images. They've also got a bunch of different parameters that you can set in terms of the amount of stylization, for example, that Midjourney is going to put on that image. Do you want it to be very literal, or do you want it to be more creative in how it interprets your prompt and use some of the Midjourney style? You can also set different aspect ratios and things like that using what's called parameters. Again, full list of those in the Quick Start Guide. If you want to maintain your sanity, the first thing you want to do is get out of those public channels and either DM the bot. So you just kind of click the Midjourney bot, say send a message, and then you can interact with the bot directly and do everything in your private messages. It is important to note with Midjourney, at least currently, if you don't have the highest plan, all of your images are publicly accessible. So keep that in mind when you're doing content that at some point somebody might see what you create. Hopefully nobody on the podcast is going to be using it for nefarious purposes, but I've asked Midjourney for some weird things. I've got an Instagram account with cats and silly hats right now. That'll be public. Even if you're doing it in your DMs. So you can DM the bot, but if you want to be an advanced user and do something really cool, you can create a private server on Discord. It's free. You just do create server. It takes like 30 seconds. You can invite the Midjourney bot to participate on your server, and then you can create channels for all the different things that you want to do.
Yep.
So I've got different channels for different workspaces depending on the type of images that I'm creating, and that kind of helps me sort them on my end a little bit. Yeah. As I mentioned, all that might be moot in 30 minutes or 6 weeks. I don't know. As Midjourney is working on a web interface and some new features there.
Yeah, agreed.
I'll just say that when I was contemplating signing up for Midjourney, Rob was kind enough to give me this rundown, and I decided not to jump in on the free one, and I just went ahead and purchased a plan and set up a private server, and I haven't had to deal with all the trying to find your images, because when you're in the free plan, you'll put your thing in, and then like 25 things generate, and it's hard to
go back and find yours. Yep. That's absolutely. I'm right there with you. I've paid for it, and it's like my own personal Slack where I can set up different channels that organize my images, and I'll click between them. I'll get one working on one thing and then jump to another channel, get one working on another thing, that sort of thing. So yeah, good rundown, Rob. Thank you for that. Tell me about your children's book. I want to get into some more things that we can do with AI imagery, Chatgpt. Tell me about Max and Teddy.
Yeah, so really this was a project when I was exploring AI, and really wanted to test the limits of what can you do with this stuff. So I'm like, let me pick a random project and let me see what I can do. Which is the story of my life, by the way. So I was like, well, let me write a children's book, for example. I've got 3 kids, 3 girls, ages almost 4, 8, and 10. I'm like, I want to write something that they'd be interested in. So went to ChatGPT and said, "Hey, ChatGPT, you're going to be a children's book author right now. Let's brainstorm some ideas." It spat out some ideas. I'm like, "Oh, hey, that's a cool concept. Let's explore this one a little bit more." So, like ChatGPT, let's expand this idea. And I came up with some more ideas. Like, that's interesting. All right, ChatGPT, let's write an outline for this, and then use ChatGPT to just kind of work through each section of the book. And it's not a huge book; it's like an 11-page kids book. But basically, using ChatGPT as a sounding board, as an editor, as a brainstorming partner, I was able to produce the content for a children's book in about an hour. That was with the 3.5 model too. The 4.0 GPT-4 model is available for Plus subscribers and even more creative. I'm working on my second installation of the Max and Teddy series currently with it. So then it's like, hey, well, I've got this story created. How can I, illustrate the story? And so, well, I've got this Midjourney thing. Let me try it. But before I got there, I said, hey, ChatGPT, let's walk through this story and suggest some potential image prompts. Here's a format that I can copy and paste into Midjourney in order to produce this. And so ChatGPT gave me a list of image prompts, did its best because it's a language model, not a AI image model. But I was able to take those, throw them into Midjourney, and start to crank out some images. Honestly, the illustration part was the hardest part for me because I wanted to have at least some level of consistency, and getting consistency without going the route that Jason mentioned earlier of training your own model or textual inversion is really hard. If we want to explore it, I've got some ideas there. But I was able to crank out some images, threw them into Canva. Put the text on there, exported it as a PDF, and then got it up on Amazon in a total of about 3.5 hours. I got one sale, so I'm making bank. Made $1.50, I think, off of that, and it was from a friend of mine, not my mom. But I read the story to my kids. Kids loved it. I wrote a second one; they loved it. So it's just kind of it was for me as an idea of figure out the workflow. How can I use this as a creative partner, and how good can it be? What are the limitations? And what are some of the parameters that you want to consider as you're going through that process? I documented it all as well. So if you want to send out a link to a doc, I can send that to you and you can share it with your listeners.
That'd be great, man.
Well, and I got to tell you, Rob, when I saw what you did, I was so inspired. I mean, that's when I really saw the potential. The fact that you were able to, I mean, I knew that GPT could help you write a story and that kind of thing, but when you were able to create something where the images told a cohesive story and there was some degree of, the artwork looked pretty consistent throughout and all that.
It did.
That's when I saw the potential. So that's one of the cool things about these little experiments. I mean, one of my favorite experiments was that I wrote a script for an alternate season 4 opener for Cheers after one of the characters passed away at the end of the season before. And I just wanted to see what would happen if they devoted a whole episode to sort of Coach's funeral. And I learned so much in the process. So like these little experiments might seem a little silly to the outsider, but there's so much you can learn just from playing around. And I was inspired by your book. Rob, made a huge difference for me.
This coming from a real author as well.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How many are you up to now, Jason, by the way?
I've written 12 books, and I'm going to give you an exclusive here. I had a contract for my next book, which was going to be on hybrid hospitality, but I talked to my publisher about how inspired I am by these AI tools, and I said something about, we really need to do a book on this. And he spent one day after he dug around a little bit, he spent a day and said, I think your next book should be on AI. So I think we're shifting the gears a bit, and I'm going to write on AI tools for the church instead of hybrid hospitality. So there's a new story.
Yay. Awesome.
He's going to write it entirely with ChatGPT as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
In 4 days.
I told you, I put him on the payroll on this podcast. Always something. All right. Tell me how you guys have played with headshots and more realistic photos. Rob, I know there's some tools coming out for more headshot type stuff too, right?
Yeah. So, I'm going to be, I like to think of myself as I'm pushing the boundaries and on the cutting edge of things. But at the same time, I need to kind of like, as a leader in my church, be thinking about ethical considerations and things like that.
Yep.
Jason, I think might disagree with me a little bit on this one. But when it comes down to things like headshots, here are some of the principles that I'm processing through. Using an AI tool and training an AI to kind of produce the characteristics that represent what you look like. I think it's a fun toy. And so, like, Jason just posted some stuff of like different stylized images that resemble his likeness. When it comes down to, I'm thinking of like the staff bio page on my website. If I'm going to present an image as if this is that person, no matter how much training I put into an AI model, I can't represent that person. And it's different than even Photoshop, in which I might be manipulating an image, but I'm generating an image based on this training data that isn't that person, and it doesn't capture who that person is. So honestly, when it comes to headshots specifically, that's kind of where I draw the line, because I don't think we're presenting it as if it's representing that person. And it's more than just an avatar. It's more than just like an expression of who they are. This is like, we're saying this is who this person is. And maybe that's just me as a photographer, but that's where I kind of draw the line. And same thing with like using realistic imagery and editorial uses. I think that there's definitely some ethical considerations before we present anything as if it's reality. Like if I'm going to present, here's an image that looks cool, and I'm going to say this is AI generated art, that's one thing. But I'm going to say like, hey, this is a photograph of something, that's a much different conversation that needs to happen.
Jason, do you differ on that?
I don't know that I differ much on that. We're all part of an AI group, and you probably saw the post that I did. I shared a church that I was speaking at a conference last week, and a new church start pastor came to me and said, we were talking about AI, and she said, I just found this website that will generate headshots. And she said, I don't have the money to hire a photographer. We're a church start. We've got nothing. And so she said, I spent $17. It generated 100 images of me. Handful of them, really looked like me and were good enough. And then a couple of my other staff members did it. We were able to use basically the same look and background and all of that. And so I shared it with that group because I think there probably are people who can't afford to hire a photographer. Now I'm a trained artist. I went to art school. I'm an illustrator, designer, all those kind of things. So, I mean, there is a part of me that has a little bit of heartburn at the thought that AI would be doing some of the work that skilled people like us have trained for and have the eye for and all that kind of thing. And so, Rob, I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about what you just shared, but I do think that there are ethical considerations that what does this mean for authenticity? Because we can make ourselves look different. The one shot she said, I like this one. It made me a lot thinner, which we can do in Photoshop too. I mean, I've had to maybe change hairlines a bit for people or make chins thin out a little bit for folks or whatever. I think where I have more fun with it is like I'm doing some branding for a conference that's coming up this fall, and it's they're using a 8-bit theme for the whole conference. So I'm generating these images that are kind of like 8-bit. The stuff that I posted yesterday was low poly. I was playing with like low poly versions of my face for branding, and so that's to me that doesn't cross that line. But I think Rob, you make some great points there, and I don't think I would argue with the fact that we don't want to mislead people or be inauthentic because there are slick tools that can make that happen pretty easily.
So let's get into a little bit more of the ethics of it. Rob, you kind of brought this up. So as far as the imagery goes, and I've asked a few people this, is this scouring the internet and forming an original piece of art when it comes to imagery, or is it stealing from artists and repurposing multiple artists' work and putting it together? What is the imagery actually doing? Do you know?
Yeah, so I've learned a lot. I've learned more than anyone would care to know about this subject, just because I had that same question. And so when I first approached AI generated imagery, again, as a photographer, as a creative, I'm like, man, I don't want my style to be emulated by somebody else. So I don't want my work to be ripped off. And so I'll preface this by saying this is an open conversation from a legal perspective, from an ethical perspective, everywhere from the training content to how that content is processed to how it ends up, on the screen, and then what comes after that too. So things like copyright, that's an active conversation. On the front end, Getty Images is suing Stability AI and some other model creators because you generate an image with Stable Diffusion and out pops a Getty Images watermark. Well, okay, that was obviously trained on Getty Images. So I was originally like, hey, I don't want to use this for anything other than just entertainment right now. But I've come a little bit further on that point now that I've understood how models actually work. So let me kind of break it down in as lay terms as I can. The way that a Stable Diffusion model works is it works a lot like the human brain. They're called neural networks because they emulate how the brain thinks. Obviously, it doesn't come with the full experience of a human being or the full ethical considerations. And we're working on a paper in our church right now about the ethics of AI and how to use it. It doesn't have the image and likeness of God imbued into it. So there are some definite considerations there. But the way that an AI image model is going to work is it's going to scour hundreds of thousands, millions of images and process them through a training model. And what that training model does is it takes an image, it pairs it up with a description of what's in that image, and then it goes through a mathematical process to break that image down and to learn the different characteristics that are in that image. That could be in terms of style, that could be in terms of subject, that could be, this is a dog, this is a cat, this is a person. It could also include things like specific artist styles. So this is a Picasso, this is a Rembrandt, this is a photograph, this is a painting. And so it takes, all these different characteristics, lumps them into a model, but then here's the thing, it discards that image. So the image itself is never stored in the model. It's learning all the different aspects of that thing, associating what it's learned with that term. And then when you go to generate, it's going to go through everything it knows about the prompt that you just gave it and all the information that it contains, and then start to pull those pieces back together and put them into a new generated work of art. And so, the description that you gave when you asked the question, is it just taking bits and pieces and smashing them together? That was my perception at the start of my journey there. But I've come to realize that it is a unique piece of art. Not that much different than if I were to look at the Starry Night and paint my own version. I've looked at it, I've processed it, and then I've done a reproduction that, if I'm going for a one-to-one reproduction, it's like, okay, it might look like it, but it's going to have my own style in there. It's not going to be perfect. That's really how I view these tools working. Now, when it comes down to emulating specific styles, I think there's still an ethical question to have there. Because Jason, as you alluded to, as creatives, like, we create art, and that's part of the unique style that we create with is part of the art that we create. It can't be separated from the artist. And so if you are trying to do a one-to-one copy of something, or even take a new idea and impose a style on it that's a style that an artist has spent their entire lifetime creating, and you're doing it casually with a few clicks, I think it at least warrants stopping and thinking about what you're doing. And I would be very slow to use that in any production environment, particularly if you're not disclosing that.
Right. Or the resale of that work and things like that. Yeah.
I'll just, one thing that comes into all this for me is when I went to art school, and I don't know if this was taught in I went specifically to a school for commercial art called the Modern College of Design. And when we turned in projects, we were required with every project we turned in to turn in references along with that project. We had to show
your sources.
It was frustrating as artists because it was like, I just want to design something out of my head. And they're like, well, you will be a starving artist if you don't look at what's in the world around you. And obviously they weren't encouraging plagiarism. They didn't want you to just copy something else, but we did have to kind of look to what other artists were doing. And I just did an experiment a couple of days ago for a session I'm doing for AI, looking at movie posters or creating a movie style poster. And one of my favorite movie poster artists is Drew Struzan, who did the Back to the Future posters and Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Hook, and just you would recognize his style. And I just wanted to see if it could do it, and it did. But I also remember probably 10 years ago, putting together a poster that I illustrated, and I illustrated in Drew Struzan style because I wanted to kind of evoke that look and feel. Now, I'm with you, like Rob, in the idea that one or two clicks feels like it maybe dishonors Drew's work that it can. So, I'm wrestling with this too, because it does feel like, and in fact, one time I actually wrote Drew when I did this other poster. And I said, I did this and tried to do this as best I could in a style similar to yours. And he was like, man, that's awesome. Keep up the great work, appreciate, your artistry, whatever. But I have a feeling that if I had sent what I just generated on Midjourney to him, he's going to have a completely different reaction because it was more or less automatic and, a whole lot less artistry. I had to be artistic in my description, and I understand the terms and the lighting and all the things that you have to describe, but it's different than creating it yourself. So It's something I think we all have to wrestle with, and it's a conversation. We should be above reproach on these things. But it's a new world. We're all just trying to kind of sort through what's what. And Rob, you said something earlier that I think was true for me too, is that my understanding when I got into this about what it was very different than what it is now that I've been in it for a while. And I think that as we continue to walk in this, our points of view are going to continue to change, and some things we're probably going to be less restrictive on, and some things we're going to say, man, there's just a clear line here that I can see now that I didn't see when we started all this.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting there too that that's one of the legal questions that's working its way through courts right now too, is a collection of artists. You can go to haveibeentrained.com, I think it is, punch in your name and see if there's any content in there that's associated with your name. I'm not cool enough to be in that camp, but someday I might be.
Jason is.
Right. And so a collection of artists who had confirmed that they were in a training data set have gone to the courts and now are trying to settle that. And I think, just based on my understanding of how the model works, that from a legal perspective, there's not a whole lot they can do, but it still provokes the ethical questions about how things are being created. And as I alluded to earlier, Adobe is making some strides in this area. One of the things that they just released through Firefly and also through Lightroom is a thing called content credentials, which discloses where things are coming from. And if it's generated with AI or not, kind of including some of that in the metadata so that you can at least be aware. And there's also tools out there that are emerging, not really effective yet, for opting out of having your content trained. Of course, the model needs to respect that. And as it is the wild, wild west, there's not a whole lot of enforceability right there right now.
Right.
Yeah. But I think we also, I think you or somebody on one of our groups was talking about developing an AI policy for your church. And I think that's important for us to consider. I've been teaching for 20 years on using screens in worship and media, and I often share the Copyright Act of 76 which says that in the course of religious assembly, you have the right to show any non-sequential image, any non-motion picture in the course of religious assembly. Now, that technically means that I could go to an image from Shutterstock and use it in worship, and I'm not, without paying for it, and I'm not breaking the law. But there's an ethical consideration too, that this is stock media that does have a cost associated with it, and just because I can doesn't mean that I should or that it's right to. And so I think those are the kind of conversations we've got to be having as we think about, how we use these tools moving forward.
Good. All right. One other ethics question, then I'm going to hit you guys with some rapid fire. So let's talk about the biases. And when I first dove into Chatgpt, especially, I started hitting it with as much theology, with as much political, which as much as I could, just to kind of see where it was, to see if it was being input or trained by a certain ideology or a certain lean. And there definitely was. The most obvious of that was I would put in, write 10 positive facts about Joe Biden, and it would spit it out, and write 10 positive facts about Donald Trump. I'm sorry, I can't do that. And so there were multiple things like that, or some, some social issues, abortion, or how men can have babies, or things like that. Just some hot button issues that I would try to hit with it. Some would go the way one way, and sometimes it would like argue a certain way, and so it was kind of all over the board. I think some of that's gotten better, but Rob, why don't you hit on this? What are the dangers that we should really consider, or the biases of how the AI is being trained?
Yeah, so just kind of a quick overview of where bias can show up in the pipeline, because I've done a lot of work on this as well. You're starting out with a data set from which either a language model or an image model is being trained. And so anything that's inherent in that data set is going to end up in the end product. And so, for example, I had a conversation with a colleague in the AI for Pastors group, and he brought up, hey, in Midjourney, a lot of times if I type in something generic, I'm going to get a white dude, unless I specifically prompt for something other than that. And I did some really ADHD hyperfocus kicked in. I did like 15 hours of research into it. And, for some prompts it's true. And for some prompts it shows that, like, for example, if I type in a student, or like a photo of a student or a photo of a male student, things like that, I see a lot of diversity. And if we think about how like stock imagery is used and the values that are inherent in stock imagery, it's like, hey, when I'm going to a college and looking at a college university website, they want to show diversity. And so we're going to have a lot of diversity in those images. So the data on which the model is trained is going to be one section where bias can show up. The next step in the process is when all of that raw data is then condensed into like, hey, we can't train it on everything, so we need to pick a subset of that data to train our model. How are we going to do that? On the image side, one of the common data sets that are used for that is the LAION, L-A-I-O-N data set, which contains years and years of images and text pairs scraped from the internet. And on the text side of things, you've got works of literature from decades and centuries past. You've got the entirety of Wikipedia, tons of data to be trained on. On the image side, the LAION database has a subset called the aesthetics database, which basically takes all the images in the data set, runs them through an algorithm to say, what's the most aesthetic of these? And let's use that to train our model. That's going to have a point where bias can show up as well, because what is aesthetic? What is beauty? And why don't we want something that's not aesthetic in our data set? So that can kind of further condense and the pipeline by which bias can show up in the model. Third is when we get to the actual commercial tool that we're using. So Midjourney for images, Chatgpt in your experience for text, where the developers, rightly so, are trying to put some guardrails on. Hey, we've got all this stuff floating out there. We don't want somebody to figure out how to make a bomb, for example, with ChatGPT. Let's put some guardrails in there. And then also on the, just the personality side of things, let's not create deliberately offensive content. And so there's a couple ways they can do that. They can either kind of give the warning. So if I say, hey, tell me about your plan to take over the world, AI, it'll be like, as a language model, I can't really have thoughts and feelings. But if you really want to do this, let me tell you how I'm going to do it and create a fictional story. Or like you've experienced, there's some guardrails on, hey, there's certain personalities that are more controversial to certain groups of people. How are we going to treat those conversations fairly and those issues fairly? And so that's what kind of in that in the commercial product that you are using, the developers are going to kind of impose a perspective or a bias on it. And so I think that in order to democratize that and to avoid that, one, we just need to be aware of all those different points in the process where bias can show up, and like honor the intent that's going behind that. But then also, the cool thing about this community right now in this industry is that there's so much open source content available. So there's Chatgpt, that's a commercial product, but then there's also, Facebook just released a model. Stanford, I think it was, created a model, and with some tech know-how, you can actually use these in order to do whatever you want with them, even if it was for nefarious purposes. So I think having more players in the game will help with that, because, I know if I'm going to go to Google, I'm going to get one perspective that's going to be filtered. And if I go to a different search engine like DuckDuckGo, I'm going to get another perspective. And so if there's stuff that I'm looking for that's particularly slanted in one direction, I'll know to use a different tool for that. I think it's the state of our time that's going to be the case for a while. But knowing where those limitations are, and not how to get around them from a dangerous perspective, but how to find unbiased and unfiltered content, or the least biased and least filtered content you can. Just being aware of the issue and having those resources is helpful.
Jason, what do you think?
I think Rob is smart, and I really enjoyed everything he just said. I think he's done the deep dive.
Yeah.
I will say this, that if you only work with ChatGPT and these other resources at a surfacey level, you're going to get much more bias and things like that. Because you can train GPT to have the conversation with you, and you can say, I've seen people say, I want you to write this in the voice of N.T. Wright, the biblical scholar. And it's going to, knowing those works, it's going to come back at you with something that comes from that theological perspective and, whatever. I've also found that you've got to make sure that you're not overly trusting of the information you get from it. I had another friend who's in an academic setting, and he posted something about he was doing some kind of media research, and it referenced a book that it attributed to me and my former co-author, Lynn Wilson and Jason Moore, and it had a title of a book and blah, blah, blah. And he sent that to me. He's like, what is this book? I'm like, I didn't write that book. I don't know anything about it. And ChatGPT more or less made up this fact. So we've got to be mindful that you can't just blindly trust it. And the more you work back and forth with it, the better the content you get out of it is going to be.
Yeah, I agree with you. The more specific you are, or training it, better prompts you use, that sort of thing. All right.
Well, and I saw, I'll just say really quickly, I saw the exchange that Rob had with the person that was complaining about the bias. And the thing is if you leave it at that, I mean, every time I've tried to get something specifically a different ethnicity or whatever, as long as you tell it, it will come back. It's not going to fight you and give you. But again, junk in, junk out, or no good input in and bad input out. Basically, is what you're going to get.
Good. All right, rapid fire before I leave you guys. You ready? All right, Rob, you're up first. What is the craziest thing that you are seeing in the world of AI? What is surprising you right now?
I'm going to give you two things. One is just how many open source tools are available and how quickly they're developing. So like this space, if you try to keep up, you can't keep up.
Yeah.
And then specifically, there's some really cool stuff coming out of a group called Runway ML, They have the Gen 1 video model for creating stylized video content. So basically, you give it a video, it stylizes it. That's really good. But they're beta testing their Gen 2 model, which is generative video AI. And it's still a developing space, but it's really cool, and it's going to be really powerful.
We're going to be out of a job very quickly, fellas.
No, I will. I see this all the time. I don't remember who said it. Some tech CEO, but he said that you won't be replaced with AI. A human using AI will replace you. So learn to use AI and safeguard your job for the future.
There you go. All right, Jason, what should we be the most scared of when it comes to AI? I should say I'm wearing my Skynet shirt. I texted Jason this morning. Let me see if I can get my camera down. My Skynet. Go. So are the machines going to take it's a Terminator reference for people who don't know.
Yes.
Are the machines going to take over, Jason?
I have definitely had some concern. I mean, I grew up on all those movies too. And when you see all these tech industry folks say we need to stop and pause for a second and understand what's happening, that definitely gives me a bit of concern that we might want to pause. I'm a little bit afraid that at this point the cat's out of the bag.
Right?
So I don't know. Could we stop it if it did somehow become self-aware? I don't know. I don't know that a language model can turn on us, but we're hooking GPT up to the internet now, and I just saw. You probably saw the story too, but they just produced a political ad the other day that very much looked like it was. It was like, here's what the future is with Biden kind of thing. And we are all discerning enough to know that was AI generated and what it could be. But now we're getting to the place where we could convincingly speak in somebody's voice with their face. And that to me is very scary. I feel like there is a level of divisiveness that could come from this technology that some folks will not be able to recognize.
Yeah, or distinguish reality. If it's on video, I got to trust it, right? Well, maybe not.
Right.
The observation last week when that came out that we are in for a very interesting 2024 election season.
Yes.
Buckle your seatbelts.
Yes, right. Absolutely.
Rob, what is one thing ministry leaders should absolutely be using AI to help their church with?
So I think that my experience with Chatgpt has revolutionized how I work. I help lead a creative team at our church, but we're onboarding interns. We've got policy to write and things like that, and using Chatgpt and other generative AI tools like Midjourney in the creative process has just opened up new doors in terms of productivity, in terms of creativity. For example, I don't want to go through the boring administrative stuff. So I can literally took a email chain between me and a prospective intern, in which I'd already asked all the questions of what are you hoping to accomplish with an internship. I threw it into ChatGPT with some framing. You're a hiring manager at our church. Here's the person you're hiring. Here's what you're trying to do. And it said, write a job description. And just wanted to see what it came out with. I used it verbatim. It was perfect because it summarized all the things that had already been discussed, all the hard work that I had done. It was able to compile and output for me. Then I said, write an offer letter. And that's not something that's coming as a heartfelt, hey, I love you kind of conversation. It's a formality. Used it almost verbatim. Then I said, write a training plan for an 8-week internship, and it spit it out. And so I think that learning the technology and then figuring out how to use it as a virtual assistant, of sorts. How to use it to augment your ministry, not replace it, but enhance it. You're going to save hours and hours of work, and you're going to be more effective at what you are gifted at and good at doing.
Jason, what's the most common question that you're getting from people as it relates to AI?
Well, most people want to know how to get these images to look as good as some of the images that I've been able to create, not recognizing that there is an art to prompting. So, I go and I ask it to do a thing, and I get nothing that looks anything like that. Digging a little deeper into the tools, learning, how to use tags and, negative prompting and, what you don't want in there and all that can really make all the difference. But that's what I'm getting is, how are you getting images that look this good? Because I can't get anywhere near that. Also, I mean, you're not going to get as good at images in Canva as you're going to get in Midjourney. I mean, the algorithms and the resources are written differently, and that kind of thing.
All right, Rob, last one to you. What are some things that you see for the future of AI and the church that's really exciting? What do you think is coming?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's like a lot of the benefit is here. So, the things that are coming in the future, I think, are really cool and interesting play toys. But I think that what we have now is so good. And you kind of go back to my previous response. There's so much you can do with Chatgpt that it's going to really unlock how ministry leaders do their work. So I think that, just the proliferation of these tools and getting them into the hands of the people who can use them. The way that I look at it is Chatgpt, for example, is able to take a resource-strapped church that you don't have the resources to hire a full-time admin. You don't have the resources to have a research assistant. You don't have the resources to subscribe to all these different things. If you have Chatgpt, as I mentioned, you can save hours and hours of work and basically build a team of assistants to help you do ministry tasks. Again, not the pastoral shepherding portion of our job, but the administrative and technical side of our things. You can, save, take all that money that you're going to be saving on a hire and put it into a pastoral hire versus an administrative hire, for example. It's just so incredible how this technology is going to democratize, the process of, just doing work.
Agreed. And I think it's already happening, but I think as the tools begin to talk to each other more and more, like one thing we didn't get into is how Midjourney can't really do text well yet. Like you kind of have to take it into Photoshop and add your own text on it and things like that. But I think that the more that it can read text, the more that it plays well with social media platforms and other tools. I mean, we're already starting to see that where, Chatgpt mixed with Zapier, mixed with Instagram, it's going to transform communications directors. And those are some of the things I'm seeing down the road. But well, guys, thank you so much for your insight in this. We just really appreciate it. And I agree with you, Rob. If we don't get this episode out right now, in about 30 minutes, everything's going to be a moot point. So
it'll be fun to go back. It'll be fun to go back and look at this even in 6 months and see how much different, like, wow, we had no clue what was going to happen.
Exactly. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. Hey guys, at 1230 Media, one area that we serve churches and ministries is with custom media content. And when God called me years ago to start this ministry, He planted in me a calling to reach thousands of churches, and it's amazing to see that happen. All glory to Jesus Christ. It's amazing to watch how our team is being an impact and helping folks like you, churches like yourselves, ministries, share the gospel using media content. We are the go-to media provider for several of the leading ministries in the nation. Folks like Outreach, Awana, Answers in Genesis, Seeds Family Worship, Grow Curriculum, the Southern Baptist Convention, the National Religious Broadcasters, and more. These ministries alone serve thousands and thousands of churches. So it is so humbling to be trusted by these folks to produce graphics and video content for the resources that they provide. We also serve dozens of churches like Starpoint Church, Crossroads Church, Mountain Park Church, Union Church, Church at the Crossing, Atlantic Shores Baptist, and many more. If we can help you with any custom graphics or video need that you might have at your church, from sermon series design, announcement and event graphics, social media graphics, sermon bumpers, promo videos, sermon edits, or anything else, please let us know. You can contact our team today and get your project started with us at 1230.media/custom. That's 1230.media/custom.
The show notes for this episode are available now at makingsundayhappen.com.
Well, hey guys, thanks so much for checking out this bonus episode of our podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you never miss an episode of the show. And don't miss our latest episode with Chris Tomlin is on YouTube. It is out. It is released. It just released a few days ago. So I talked with Chris about leading worship. We talked about songwriting. We talked about his most cringe-worthy song ever. That and more is in that episode. So be sure to check that out. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check that episode out with Chris Tomlin. And more to come. We got some great episodes lined up in the coming weeks. So be sure to subscribe so that you get notified when a new episode releases every single Monday for you. All right? Well, go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this weekend at your church. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit makingsundayhappen.com.